In Hollywood, fame can make you, but it can also destroy you. There are stars who rise fast, shine bright, and disappear forever. And then, there are legends who fall to the darkest depths and somehow climb back stronger than ever. This is the story of Robert Downey Jr., a man who had everything, lost everything, and then became Iron Man. Before the billion-dollar movies, before the global fame, before the iconic suit and the genius billionaire image, there was a broken young man fighting his own demons. Arrests, addiction, prison, a career that Hollywood had completely given up on. Studios refused to insure him. Directors avoided him. He was labeled unreliable, dangerous, and finished. Imagine being at the top and then becoming someone no one wants to work with. That was Robert Downey Jr.'s reality. But here's where the story changes, because not every fallen star stays down. Some fight, some rebuild, some rewrite their destiny. And Robert didn't just come back. He made one of the greatest comebacks in entertainment history. From sleeping in jail cells to leading the biggest movie franchise on Earth. From being a risk to becoming the face of Marvel. From chaos to control. This is not just a success story. This is a story of redemption, discipline, and transformation. How did a man once considered Hollywood's biggest problem become its most valuable star? What really happened behind the scenes of his addiction? And how did Iron Man save not just Marvel, but Robert Downey Jr. himself? Stay with us, because this story will change the way you see fame, failure, and second chances forever. Clapperboard 40-minute full documentary script, long cinematic paragraph. Robert Downey Jr.'s story doesn't begin with Iron Man. It begins with chaos, privilege, and exposure to a world that would shape both his genius and his struggles. Born into a Hollywood family, Robert was introduced to acting at a very young age by his father, an underground filmmaker. But along with creativity came something far more dangerous: exposure to drugs at an early age. While most children were learning how to ride bikes, Robert was being introduced to substances that would later control his life. Yet even in his teenage years, his talent was undeniable. He had a natural charisma, a magnetic presence, and an ability to transform into any character. By the 1980s, he was already making a name for himself in Hollywood, becoming part of a group of rising young actors known for their rebellious energy. His performances were praised, his future looked bright, and everything seemed perfectly aligned for superstardom. But beneath the surface, the addiction was growing stronger. As his career began to rise, so did his dependence on drugs. What started as experimentation became a daily necessity. And slowly, Hollywood began to notice, not just his talent, but his instability. Despite delivering critically acclaimed performances, including a powerful portrayal that earned him major recognition, his personal life was spiraling out of control. Arrests became frequent. Rehab attempts failed. Headlines began to shift from rising star to troubled actor. Directors started hesitating. Producers started backing away. Insurance companies refused to cover him, making it nearly impossible for him to be cast in films. Imagine having world-class talent, but no one willing to take the risk on you. That's exactly where Robert found himself. Then came the darkest chapter: prison. Robert Downey Jr., once a celebrated actor, was now sitting behind bars. The man who once walked red carpets was now living a completely different reality. For many, this would have been the end. Hollywood has a long history of forgetting fallen stars. But something inside Robert didn't break completely. There was still a part of him that wanted to fight, to reclaim his life, to prove that he was more than his mistakes. But the road back wasn't easy. Even after being released, the industry still didn't trust him. He was fired from projects. Opportunities slipped away. Every step forward felt like 2 steps back. And then came the turning point. Robert made a decision, a real one. Not for fame, not for money, but for survival. He committed to sobriety. This wasn't a temporary fix. It was a complete lifestyle change. Through discipline, support, and determination, he slowly began rebuilding himself, not just as an actor, but as a person. And as he started to regain control of his life, something incredible happened. People started noticing again. Not the old Robert, but a new version, focused, reliable, and hungry for redemption. Small roles began to come his way. Not big blockbusters, not leading roles, but opportunities. And Robert treated each one like it was his last chance. He showed up on time. He delivered powerful performances. He proved that he could be trusted again. Slowly, the industry began to reconsider him, but no one could have predicted what would happen next. In 2008, a gamble was made, a risky, almost unbelievable decision. A studio decided to cast Robert Downey Jr. as Tony Stark in a film about a relatively unknown superhero called Iron Man. At the time, it sounded crazy. Why cast someone with such a troubled past as the face of a major franchise? But the director believed something others didn't, that Robert wasn't just playing Tony Stark, he was Tony Stark. A genius, flawed, charismatic man trying to redeem himself. And when the movie was released, everything changed. Iron Man wasn't just a success, it was a phenomenon. Robert Downey Jr. didn't just act, he became the character. His performance was electric, authentic, and unforgettable. Audiences didn't just see a superhero, they saw a man who had lived through failure and come out stronger. And just like that, Robert Downey Jr. went from being Hollywood's biggest risk to its biggest asset. The film launched what would become the Marvel Cinematic Universe, the most successful film franchise in history. And at the center of it all was Robert. With each new film, his popularity grew. He became one of the highest-paid actors in the world. Fans loved him, not just for his acting, but for his story. He wasn't perfect. He wasn't manufactured. He was real. And in an industry full of polished images, that authenticity made him stand out. But perhaps the most powerful part of his journey wasn't the fame or the money, it was the message. That no matter how far you fall, you can rise again. However, success didn't erase his past, it transformed it. Robert never hid his struggles. Instead, he embraced them as part of his story. He became a symbol of recovery, of second chances, of resilience. He used his platform to inspire others, to show that failure doesn't define you, your response to it does. And when he eventually stepped away from the role of Iron Man, it wasn't just the end of a character, it was the closing of a full circle. The man who once needed saving had become the hero. Today, Robert Downey Jr. is more than just an actor. He's a living example of transformation. From addiction to discipline, from prison to power, from broken to legendary, his journey proves that redemption is possible. Not easy, not quick, but possible. And perhaps that's why his story resonates so deeply, because it's not just about Hollywood. It's about life. It's about mistakes, consequences, and the courage to change. If a man who lost everything can rebuild his life and become a legend, then what's stopping you? Maybe your story hasn't even started yet. Now, before you leave this story behind, take a moment and think. This wasn't just the journey of a Hollywood actor. This was the story of a human being who made mistakes, faced consequences, and still found a way to rise again. And maybe, in some way, this story is about you too. Because let's be honest, life doesn't always go the way we plan. Sometimes we fail. Sometimes we lose control. Sometimes we make decisions we regret. And sometimes we feel like it's too late to fix anything. Like the world has already judged us. Like our story is already written. But here's the truth this journey proves. Your story is never finished unless you decide it is. Robert Downey Jr. didn't change his life overnight. There was no magic moment, no instant transformation. It was painful, slow, uncertain. He failed multiple times before finally standing strong. And that's something people don't talk about enough. Real change is messy. It's not perfect. It's not quick. It's a battle you fight every single day. So if you're someone who feels stuck right now, listen carefully. You don't need to become perfect. You don't need to fix everything in one day. You just need to take one step. One small decision in the right direction. That's how every comeback begins. Maybe your struggle is an addiction. Maybe it's self-doubt. Maybe it's fear. Maybe it's failure in studies, career, or relationships. But whatever it is, don't let it define you. Because the moment you believe this is who I am and I can't change, that's the moment you lose. Not when you fail, but when you stop trying. Another thing this story teaches us is the power of discipline. Talent alone isn't enough. Robert was talented from the beginning, but talent didn't save him. Discipline did. Consistency did. The decision to show up every single day, even when it was hard, that's what changed everything. And think about this. How many opportunities are you ignoring right now? How many chances are you wasting because you think they're too small? Robert didn't come back with a blockbuster. He came back with small roles, quiet performances, steps that didn't look impressive, but they mattered. Because every small step builds momentum. So don't wait for a big break. Start where you are. Use what you have. Do what you can. And here's something even deeper. Surround yourself with the right people. Because no one makes a comeback alone. Support matters. Guidance matters. Sometimes, the difference between falling and rising is who's standing beside you. Also, forgive yourself. This is important. You cannot build a better future while constantly punishing yourself for the past. Learn from your mistakes, but don't live inside them. Growth requires letting go. And finally, believe in second chances. Not just for others, but for yourself. Because the world may doubt you. People may label you. They may remind you of your worst moments again and again. But none of that matters if you decide to rewrite your story. At the end of the day, your life is your responsibility. Your choices, your actions, your comeback. So ask yourself right now, are you going to stay where you are, or are you ready to rise? Because if a man who lost everything can rebuild his life and become a global icon, then imagine what you can do with the chances you still have. This isn't just his story anymore. This is your reminder.